Good evening. Welcome to the Jefferson County public hearing on the fiscal year 23 proposed budget. If you would please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, Katie. Please join us. I know we spent some time last week going through this in detail, so I don't know if you just want to highlight things or if the board has any questions or if you have a plan.
I was really going to say that we, of course, had it open for any public comment and we didn't receive any public comments. So I can go over high level if you want again, or it's whatever the board would like for me to do. Nothing has changed. I haven't had any, correspondence or anything from any of the board members as far as any further questions or anything they would like to see changed. So the budget still stands as it was when we met last Monday.
Okay. Do any board members have any questions or comments on the proposed budget?
I sent my questions to Dr. Gibson. I didn't realize that they should have been sent to you. Yeah, I was asking for more specific details about the money that we spend for EPIC. And at the last meeting, I said that I was concerned that all the schools presented their requests during the LSIC meetings, and I didn't see interventionists listed in the budget. And I felt like that was pretty much the theme. And so that's concerning to me. So none of that's changed.
I don't want you to
Oh, no,
say-
I got you.
Yeah, I don't want you to get sick. So the budget questions that I have from you, Dr. Joy, were prior to Friday's budget meeting at which the board, my staff presented to the board EPIC information and you asked questions at that time.
And then
got
I sent a
information from
follow-up
them.
email saying that that wasn't specific, that those were general, and asking for more specific. I
So
gave some examples. I said, well, instead of just Head Start, how many books we're buying for Head Start, or how many children are being serviced, some more detail instead of just an overall category of Head Start or transportation.
And as always, and I believe was part of your presentation at the budget meeting last week, EPIC does have a budget that it releases, a full detailed budget, just as we do. It has a board. Mr. Osborne is the chair of that board. And if this board would like to see their full detailed budget, you are more than welcome to that. We would be happy to provide it to you.
I've been
That's
asking
not a
for
problem.
some time. I asked several times, and you kept saying that at the budget meeting, you would reveal this information. And then at the budget meeting, it wasn't revealed. So then I followed up with an email to you asking for more detail.
I'm sorry that we have miscommunicated, Dr. Joy. I am happy to provide you and the board the level of detail that you wish from the EPIC budget. I am happy to take the monthly EPIC budget that their board approves and to send it straight forward to this board. That is not a problem.
Okay. And the LSIC positions, the items that were requested from all of these schools, I didn't see any interventionists listed.
When we met individually with each one of the principals and went over the list of positions in our budget, what you see reflected in that budget is their final request. Certainly, if we had an unlimited amount of funds, that request could continue on, but when we asked them, that's where they drew the line at what they would think was most beneficial for students. All of them currently have intervention support. Every single school that we have has language arts and mathematics intervention. Would all of them like more? Yes, they certainly would. And budget wise, if the board would like to extend ourselves to a greater extent, purchasing more intervention services, we can certainly do that. We did, however, meet with every single individual principal one-on-one with their school, their budget, their needs, and ask them to prioritize for us. And that budget represents what they prioritized.
So with this request for the assistant principals, which I understand is desperately needed at the elementary level, it would seem that these assistant principals could take over the role of the special ed coordinator in the IEP meetings maybe, and do the phone calls, which it sounded like these special ed liaison people were going to be hired to do, make phone calls. So if you're already getting a new employee, this assistant principal, that means maybe you would have some space for an interventionist, as opposed to all of these special ed positions, which, you know, if they're needed, that's one thing, but it just sounded like if you're already getting a new position, has that been considered?
That's a good question. And if I understand you correctly, when we met with the elementary principals, the next elementary principal on the list, Ranson Elementary, would receive a full-time assistant principal. The other 4 elementary principals would split to where there was a half-time at each one of the 4 remaining elementary schools. And they did have a number of duties for those assistant principals. One of the things that they could assist with is the volume of IEP meetings that principals have to attend as part of their duties, not just IEP meetings, but SAT meetings, student assistant teams meetings, and allow the principals to do more instructional leadership where they are coaching teachers and doing walkthroughs at the school and meeting with parents. Now that is not quite as involved as what Mr. Wink had developed for job descriptions with the elementary principals for the special education support staff. But if he'd like to speak to, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of what the elementary support folks would be doing. I would also point out that those elementary special education supports are service personnel positions.
Yeah,
Those are
that's
not
my
professional
concern,
positions.
because if they're going to be part of this, the special ed process, I would imagine that you would need a professional, and this assistant principal, since if they were going to take over some of the duties of the principal, maybe they could, it would be more appropriate for them to be making contact with the parents that they're going to be helping anyway. And I was going to add that I believe Shepherdstown Elementary has more students than Shepherdstown Middle, and yet Shepherdstown Middle has an assistant principal, but Shepherdstown Elementary doesn't. Is that correct?
That is accurate. Yes, ma'am.
So why wouldn't Shepherdstown Elementary have a full-time assistant principal?
Well, once again, they are next on the rubric after Ranson. If the board wished to have Shepherdstown Middle School have the full-time, and then the other 2 others have a split, and then 1 elementary school have no assistant principal. When we met with all of the elementary principals, that solution was the one that they came up with and they felt was the most fair and beneficial for all of them. So we took their advisement.
And part of that process is, I mean, all of our high schools have assistant principals, all of our middle schools have assistant principals. It was the elementary schools that were lacking assistant principals. And so we came up with a plan, 7 years ago, to start working them in so that every elementary school would have an assistant principal. And this is just the next step in that. And at this point, we can't even afford to put an assistant principal at every school. And so that's why they're being split. Am I
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
And also I would point out that all of the other 3 middle schools have 2 assistant principals based on their size, and Shepherdstown Middle School only has 1.
Yeah, I understand about the 5 or, as you say, 7-year plan for this, the elementary school assistant principals. I thought there was a budget excess surplus. There was extra money in the budget. Is that not correct?
Well, there's always money in the budget to roll over. We never budget out every single dime that we have incoming because we have things that come during the year. If we have a student who moves in, and this happens, we have a student with a disability who moves in who requires a 6-figure placement at an out of district because they already have an IEP, or someone has a full-time one-on-one, or inexplicably we have, because we don't know who's moving into these housing developments. All of a sudden we have a bubble at the 3rd grade and we have to hire another teacher for Wright Denny. That's what that money is held in reserve for. And as always, that reserve belongs to the board. And if they make a decision during the year, if we come back to you and we say, hey, this was the need that we have, then we can point out that reserve and the funds that you have to be able to address that.
Why would these schools come and ask for interventionists if they already had them? I think math was a pretty frequent request, a math interventionist, as if they didn't have them.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct. The schools, not all the schools have full-time math interventionists. They all have intervention funding and they all have interventionists. They do not all have a full-time person for English language arts and a full-time person for mathematics. And to their point, it is very difficult for us to get people who have the mathematics background to be interventionists. They are struggling with that. And what several of them do is they hire retired teachers with backgrounds in that, as you well know, to either come after school or during link sessions so they can send kids into tutoring sessions. Would they like to have more money to do that? Absolutely. The more money is the more hours that they can pay for. And if they could get another full-time dedicated position, yes, they would very much like that. And I would love to give it to them.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne, did you have a question?
Yes, I have 2 questions. First of all, I'm not in agreement with this special education elementary liaison 3 positions. I don't think this is an effective and efficient way to use this funding. These positions can do about 1/4 of what needs to be done at the school. I think we need IEP coordinators. If we could take that money and put it into 2 IEP coordinators, I would see that much more useful because they would be able to do observations on those children. That is where we qualify children. And so that is a real tough thing to do and a time-consuming thing to do. And I'd much rather see IEP coordinators at the elementary level than these liaisons. Interventionists, we talk a great deal about early intervention, and we have a whole group of children in grades 1 through 3 that receive very little high-quality instruction in reading in particular. These students need intense instruction and at this time to help bridge the gap that COVID created. We can't wait till these students get further behind in their careers to help them in reading and mathematics area. I just think we need to have intense instruction for those kids in grade 1 through 3. I know we have interventions in the schools. I understand that, but I just don't think we have enough. And I just don't think, I don't think service personnel for those positions is going to be effective at all.
Can I ask a quick question? Were many of our interventionists pulled from doing intervention into the classroom to cover deficiencies in teachers?
Ones who were full-time, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Absolutely, they were. To be able to cover just our basic classes every day. We have many schools, especially our high school level, but at every level where we were pulling interventionists, librarians, coaches to teach because that was needed. So again, this is your budget. So to your point, if what you would like for us to do is to pull the elementary special education positions, go back and bring back a proposal for those, meet with the elementary principals and say, hey, let's talk about what your duties are for your AP in light of these positions. How would you like to separate this? And look at the interventionists. You certainly have the capacity to pull those things out of the budget, us come back to you with what your reserve is, what your rollover is, and then you make a decision from there about whether you want to add any additional positions.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Just to make sure for everybody who might not understand, how many interventionists are there? High school, middle school, elementary, for those who don't know any better.
Ooh, that is a good question. I can get you that information for for some of them, like let's say a Ranson Elementary School, which is a Title I school. I think they have 3 full-time interventionists, 2 full-time and 1 that's 2 different people who are making up different hours of that. At some of our schools, they have a pot of money. They'll have, say, $20,000. And so they'll hire different people. Okay, Ms. Johnson can do Tuesdays, and she was really great, with kids 1 through 2. So we'll pull intervention for her to do during those times. Okay, Miss Jones. So more of them take their money and take different pieces of it, because the vast majority of them use retired teachers who aren't going to come in 5 days a week. And there's a reason they don't have a full-time job, like if you were out at Ranson, Candy Kane, who I adore and is wonderful, fantastic science teacher. She does our science Olympiad. She's not going to be there every single, day. So she's going to do so many hours a week of intervention and support. So we have a number of those, and it tends to be part-time people. But
They're professional.
Yes, sir.
certified? Okay, I was gonna make sure.
Yes, sir. All of them professional. We do not currently have service intervention positions.
I personally feel like Mr. Wink's done a really good job of putting together as much as possible, as quickly as possible, knowing that it's a big ask. I mean, it's a huge department. It's a lot of our money. And it's obviously extremely important. And I do think it might benefit us to take a little bit of time to take a step back and look at from early intervention on, because we know where that's the key. And I honestly did not realize even till maybe 2-3 months ago that West Virginia doesn't recognize autism until age 5, that somehow it doesn't exist until then, when my own child was diagnosed at 2.5. So I'm not quite sure how that actually works, but clearly there's some inadequacies, let's say, all the way up. So we know early intervention makes a difference. And we know if we hit that, we're going to have less needs in the elementary level, but probably more in the middle school level. The elementary level, we're going to need to get those services in. So I think that to take a step back and really look at how we do all of these meetings, how we coordinate them. We have all these little islands, and every school, does them differently, but somehow merge that together and make sure that this is definitely our need. I mean, I know that seems like a need because everybody's so overwhelmed, but I think you're right. I think if we take a step back and really look at what we have and what is our real need. And I think that, and I'm not saying that the service personnel couldn't do that, but because of the qualifications necessary to help write those IEPs or manage those IEPs or do what's actually asked of by the teachers, they just can't do that. By law, they can't do that. So I think to look at that a little bit closer doesn't mean we won't do something. Obviously, we have to do something. There's needs and gaps there. But I do think it makes sense to take that out of the budget currently and then personally wait, come back with another objective of another plan of what you think would work the best. And then we can look to add that, coming before the school year starts or whenever it might be needed.
So I'd like to recap just to make sure that I understand the will of the board in terms of that exchange. So it sounds like, number one, you would like for us to pull out the 3 elementary special education service positions. Number two, you would like me to go back to the elementary principals. And while you seem comfortable with approving those 3 AP positions today, you'd like for us to meet with them and discuss with them the job descriptions and what they feel comfortable or they feel is necessary for those individuals to work on for special education students and take over those duties. And number three, you want us to look at the budget and speak with them about how they could utilize IEP coordinators, professional positions in lieu of service positions at elementary. And we could bring you back the AP job descriptions versus IEP coordinators and how those roles fit together. Is that accurate?
That sounds accurate. I just am a little concerned about adding that extra duty to the APs, considering the fact that they're already going to be split between 2 schools.
It would be difficult doing that at 2 different schools as well. And we have IEP coordinators full-time at the high school and have part-time ones at the middle school level. Why don't we have them at the elementary level? That's where we're identifying kids. That's where they do observations, that we really need them when we're identifying children.
So does that mean that you're comfortable with the elementary AP and it's more you want us to pull those 3 elementary service positions and you want us to speak with the elementary principals about making those IEP coordinator positions as we have at middle and high school? Just make sure that those job descriptions are reflective of, as you say, there are a lot, things are very different with initial identification than they are with re-identification.
Either IEP coordinators or interventionists or whatever they think the money would be best spent.
I just wanted to add also, if it's not possible to get these coordinators full-time, at least pay special ed teachers an additional $50 to $100 for every IEP that they write, because they're having to do this on their own time. And that would help alleviate some of the burden.
If we, so you would,
Something to consider.
okay. And so we pull those out and then when you approve the budget, it will be without those in them. And then we would come back to you after meeting with the elementary principals and say, of the rollover that we had of the remainder that we had, here's what you can invest. Here's the recommendation from elementary principals for interventionists.
Well, it'd be the rollover
IEP
and the
coordinators.
amount of money that would be for those 3 positions that we're not putting in
Okay.
the budget currently.
Yes, ma'am.
So
And allowing, obviously, for Mr. Wink to be able to, when you guys meet with those, if there's something else that you come up with that is a better option for them. Obviously, as Mr. Osborne said, most children are identified at the elementary level. And between early intervention and elementary level, I'm definitely of the mindset that I know that the state of West Virginia may not recognize it, but obviously we recognize it. And there are many, many that need services that we're not getting them. So it will pay off for us in the future. So if there's something else that through talking with the principals, they have a better idea for this and that, whatever that happens to be, we need to push through that because that's the only way that we're going to get what we need through this and catch some kids up.
So for the purpose of this evening for the budget hearing, I'll ask for a motion to approve the fiscal year 23 proposed budget pending state board approval with the removal of number 34 on creation of new positions and taking those funds and rolling them back into the reserve. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I'm still concerned about that we don't know the money that's going to Epic. So I personally need more detail, more information about exactly what we're paying for, not a general statement that we pay for a private detective, what or Head Start, how many books or how many children are being served. So for me personally, I'm not comfortable otherwise.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to approve the fiscal year 23 proposed budget pending state board approval with the deletion of number 34. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Opposed. Okay. Thank you very much. 6:54, meeting adjourned. you.